The villages of Wycoller and Waddington aren't connected in any geographical or historical sense, except that they're both too insignificant to manage a full episode of Lancashire Footnotes on their own. They're both located roughly on the opposite sides of the Pendle district, and when they're forcibly crowbarred together, they make a slightly more impressive sounding alliterative title than when they're employed individually. Wycoller etymologically stems from the Anglo-Saxon Wyke-hour, referring to a dairy farm among some older trees, which just about sums up its insignificance. Discoveries of axe heads and flint tools indicate that the place has been occupied since the Stone Age, although it seems unlikely that any major prehistoric events ever took place here. Everybody and his pet hamster knows about the Wycoller-Bronte connection, but in case you've been dead for the past 100 years, it's generally understood that the ruins of the 16th century Wycoller Hall were the inspiration behind Ferndean Manor in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, what with her living just up the road at Haworth. Apparently she would have passed through here when she stayed with the Kay Shuttleworths at Gawthorpe Hall, and that's evidence enough for us. Wycoller Hall itself was extended in the 18th century by Squire Cunliffe, an enthusiastic if not very successful gambler who shuffled off this mortal coil in 1818 heavily in debt and left the stately old pile as, well, an unstately old pile. Nearby Wycoller Beck, they're not very inventive when it comes to naming stuff around these parts, is crossed by 7 bridges, a sizable number considering how inconsequential it is, the oldest and most basic being it just a couple of simple stone slabs, being Clam Bridge. Don't ask, we haven't got a clue. Listed as an ancient monument because it's several thousand years old. Apparently it had a handrail once. Back in the mists of history, the weavers' clogs wore grooves into the bridge's surface. This proved fatal for one local farmer's daughter, who tripped up on them and somehow kicked the bucket. After that, they were chiselled flat. Then there's the 15th century Packhorse Bridge. There had to be one, known as Sally's Bridge, after Sally Owen, the mother of the Squire of Wycoller Hall, as mentioned a couple of minutes ago. That's the sort of information you'll have forgotten by the end of this episode, but we threw it in anyway, just to pad the film out. This bridge's greatest claim to fame is that Jenny Agata's bottom, clothed for once, made contact with it in the film version of The Railway Children, during the sequence where she's talking to Dr. Forrest, who's driving his pony and trap through the ford. Wycoller, as you've probably gathered, is a trivial place, stuffed with even more trivial facts. From the 15th century onwards, Wycoller devoted its attention to the exciting, although not mutually exclusive, worlds of sheep and weaving. But the oncoming storm of power looms, most of the householders around these parts preferring their old hand looms in the same way that old biddies won't upgrade from their black and white television sets to the internet nowadays, led to the village's ultimate demise. Wycoller's population peaked in 1820 at 350, but quickly took a nosedive again when most of the weavers buggered off to more exciting towns. Nowadays, Wycoller has, or at least had, a Victorian tea rooms, a craft centre, and a gift shop. All that's missing is Inspector Barnaby and a giant killer cheese. Waddington, on the other hand, yes, we finally got there, is massive by comparison, with approximately 1,000 residents. The parish covers 839 hectares. Stop me when the excitement becomes too much. Rising 1,000 feet vertically with Waddington Fell, where, according to one website, the pastures make way for heather moorland and, in places, blanket bog. It's enough to make you want to sell up and move, especially if you live there. But there's more. The village apparently is steeped in history, with King Henry VI residing briefly at Waddington Old Hall in 1465 and the Great Two listed St Helen's Church. Obviously, this is a different definition of the word steeped than the one you'd find in the Oxford English Dictionary. St Helen's dates from the 1500s, 1800s, or at least the tower does. The rest of it, true to form, was rebuilt by those ecclesiastical vandals Austin and Paley in 1898. Inside you'll find open timber roofs, some intriguingly carved stone heads, a 16th century carved stone font, some ancient stained glass, and another window depicting St. Helen herself, flanked by Henry VI. Obviously nothing much worth recording ever happened around Waddington, and the Saxon chieftain Wadder, also known as Wade to his mates. Wadder, as you probably gathered, founded Waddington. He was recorded in the Anglo-Saxon chronicles as being involved in the murder of King Athelred in 749 AD, before being defeated in battle 4 years later at Billington near Whalley. There's a knoll named after him at Waddow Hall, if you're interested in hummocks with names. As for Henry VI, following his defeat at the Battle of Hexham during the Wars of the Roses, he went into hiding at the 12th century Waddington Old Hall, the home of Sir Richard Tempest, but was betrayed by William Cantlow, aka the fiendish Black Monk of Abingdon. On July the 13th, 1465, a group of Yorkists, including Sir Richard's brother John, entered the hall to arrest him. Henry scarpered into the nearby woods, but was caught by the bungoey hipping stones, which must have been incredibly painful. The stones, incidentally, have disappeared under the river now. Tradition has it that the king spent the night at Clitheroe Castle before being carried to London on horseback, his legs tied to the stirrups. Everybody needs a hobby. Waddington has 3 pubs, the Lower Buck Inn, the Higher Buck and the Waddington Arms. There's not a lot else to do except get bladdered in the evenings, if we're being honest. Another hall worth a mention, nowadays a hotel, is nearby Browsholme Hall, built circa 1507. Apparently it houses a fine selection of antiquities, such as a buff coat worn by Captain Thomas Whittingham, killed at the Battle of Newbury, a dog stirrup, whatever one of them is, allegedly used to control dogs in the Forest of Bowland, a skull, believed to be a martyr from the Pilgrimage of Grace, a peg tankard from the reign of Edward III, medieval stained glass, and a fragment of a Zeppelin, shot down in 1916 and given to the family as a souvenir, but it was closed, so we didn't get to see any of them. On which exciting note, click like, subscribe if you're that way inclined, and let's see if between us we can't keep the delusion going that anybody's actually watching these films. Hold on, we forgot to mention the ghost of Squire Cunliffe at Wycoller Hall, who pulls up outside the front door in his horse and runs up the stairs. Quite a feat considering there aren't any, all of which activity is followed by the sounds of a woman screaming. It's good to see that aristocratic traditions are still being carried out in the afterlife. Anyhow, back to the credits.